Welcome to Peak Performance Radio. Today we're speaking to Brian Cain. He is a sports psychologist, and today we're going to be speaking about many things of his background. He's been an athletic director. He's been working with many of the high elite athletes in the world. He also has a really interesting book, Toilets, Bricks, Fishhooks, and Pride, the Peak Performance Toolbox Exposed. So if you haven't really had the opportunity, please go ahead and take a look at his website, and it's briancain.com. And with no further ado, I'm just going to jump in and just ask my first question to Brian, and then we'll get to know a little bit about him. Brian, when you hear the term peak performance, what does that mean to you?
You know, Marcelo, the term peak performance really means to me somebody performing at the peak of their potential. You know, I think in life, even if you go back to when you were a youth participating in sports or somebody who was playing the piano, whatever their field of performance is, they can all relate back to a time where they felt unstoppable and relate back to a time when they were playing at their best. Some people may call it the zone, but I don't believe the zone exists. I believe the zone is a marathon coupled with a boxing match at the same time. You know, I don't think the zone is as sexy as people think it is. I think the zone is about compensating and adjusting. But people can go back to a time when they were playing at their best, and what peak performance is being as close to your best on a consistent basis as possible. I don't think it does anyone any good to be at their best once a month or once a season. It's about being as close to your best on a consistent basis as possible. That's what peak performance is for me.
It's really interesting. Every time I hear that response, it's so specific and unique to the individual's background that, it's curious. Your definition is more about a mindset to how you deal with the challenges that are going to be coming at you. What are some things that you feel that an athlete sometimes, or not even an athlete, but just an individual has to overcome to keep that mindset?
I think they've got to first overcome themselves, and overcome the limiting beliefs and limiting self-talk. I think sometimes your toughest critic and your toughest opponent is the 6 inches between your ears. And in my books, you mentioned Toilets, Bricks, Fishhooks, and Pride. I've actually got 4 other ones out. So What, Next Pitch, the Mental Conditioning Manual, the Daily Dominator, and Champions Tell All. And in those books, it's either, writing and research that I've done or interviews with athletes, and we refer to that voice inside of your head that people call self-talk. We refer to that as your mental assassin. And every person walking the planet has a battle that goes on every day in the 6 inches between their ears, between their red assassin, which is telling them to stop. It's kind of like the devil on the shoulder in the old Tom and Jerry cartoons. And then they've got the green assassin, which is telling them to go. And the assassin that's going to win the battle going on between your ears is going to be the one that you train. So I think the obstacles they have to overcome first and foremost is the self-limiting beliefs that they put on themselves, the negative voice that's inside of themselves, and then also the understanding that you as a human being live in the greatest time in the history of the world, and you can do anything that can be conceived can be done, and someone else has probably already done it. And the best strategy that you can come up with is to find someone who's done what you want to do, who is doing what you want to do, find out what they did, use a similar process that they did, and you'll get a similar result.
Wow. That's, for the people that are hearing this, that's so important to understand self-talk and those things right there. I mean, as an athlete, I'm nowhere near what these high-level athletes are, but I think everyone has experienced it. The little inner individual that's talking to you and that could sometimes sabotage you. You mentioned 4 of your books. First, I apologize. I just thought that the book I mentioned has such a unique title. The other books kind of elaborates on this mindset model. What are some other books that have influenced you to your success that you're in? Because you've been doing this well over many years, working in this arena. What are some things that you would say, these are some books that have influenced me and have guided me on my path?
Marcel, one of the missions that I've been on here the last 4 or 5 years has been to try to read a book a week. And, I feel like if you're going to be an expert in any field, there's 3 things you have to be able to do. Number 1 is you have to be a researcher. You have to know what's best practice and what other people are doing. Number 2, you have to be able to report that orally and written and be a very good communicator. And number 3 is you have to be a results getter. And in some of the books that I turn to most frequently, obviously Heads Up Baseball by Ken Ravizza is a book that changed in my life. And even though it's a baseball book, it's really a performance book on life, and I'd encourage everyone to pick that up. Another one would be Marshall Goldsmith, a leadership book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There, has been tremendous. Mind Gen by Gary Mack is another very good one. And really, I think there's so much value in reading, and it's kind of disappointing nowadays how many people don't read, even if it's just a book a month. I mean, if you're listening to this and you make the commitment to read a book a month, and you pick all 12 books in one topic area, time management, sports psychology, leadership, business, whatever it is, you're going to become an expert in that area in 1 year. You're going to know more than 95% of the population walking the planet if you read and apply those 12 books in that one content area. So other books that I like, John Maxwell has a daily reader called the Maxwell Daily Reader. I find that to be a pretty synopsis of a lot of the research that he's done. Obviously, Tony Robbins, Unlimited Power, Awaken the Giant Within have been fantastic. And currently I'm reading all of Tim Elmore's books. Tim Elmore has done a lot of research on this Generation IY and how today's students learn. So having read Generation IY, I'm currently reading Artificial Maturity, which is another Elmore book. And another author I'm a huge fan of is John Brubaker, who you must get on the show. He's a former college lacrosse coach, and his book that just came out called Seeds of Success is a fable about a college lacrosse coach and some life lessons that he learns along the way from his mentor. Very similar in writing style to a lot of the books you probably read by John Gordon, like The Energy Bus and Training Camp, those fables that have a message to them. So I'm a huge proponent of reading. And another one is, as I talk about it, these keep popping into my head. But if I had to say the 3 pinnacles would be Heads Up Baseball, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, and then drum roll please, The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, maybe the best of all time.
Wow. You've just shared a slew of books that I hope everyone will go out and, if not, I've read a couple. There's some books there that I'm going to pick up and read. You mentioned something, too, that great leaders are great readers, and I constantly, doing these conversations with people, it continuously pops up. Do you do any audiobooks, or do you solely read, or are you like an old school guy that has to get the book in hand, or do you do a tablet?
No, I'm not. I probably need to move to a tablet because I'm simply just running out of space in my library here. Jim Rohn always talked about, a great motivational speaker, always talked about when someone walks in your library, they should say, "Wow, this is the library of the serious student." And I feel like I've done a good job at acquiring some of the greatest books and greatest knowledge out there. I know a lot of people now are moving to the tablet. I haven't done that yet. I need to probably try that. I'm a huge audiobook guy. I have, The Compound Effect. I have The Secret. I have Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People in my car right now. I was just listening to as I drove to the beach yesterday. So I have, just a plethora of audiobooks that I share with the coaches and teams that I work with, and pass those around as well as anytime I'm in the car and I'm by myself, I'm always listening to an audiobook. I actually just canceled my XM radio subscription because I found it to be a waste of time. And then when I'm with somebody else in the car, I let them play the music they want just so that I can maintain some semblance of work-life balance and not constantly be listening to books on stream. Drives my friend.
That's funny. I find myself personally doing more audiobooks. I try to read as much as possible, but sometimes, when you're traveling or you're just about. But so next question here. I want to ask you about which people in your life have kind of made the impact and made you so successful along your path.
Well, I appreciate the compliment that I'm successful. I do appreciate that. Sometimes I wonder. It depends, I guess, on how you define success. Whether it's how much work you do or work-life balance. I think everyone has a different definition of success, and I think that definition is always changing. So for those people who are wondering if they're successful, I think that's a great time to revisit their definition of success and see if they're on path to meet that. But the people that have really had a tremendous impact on my life, first and foremost, would be my high school football coach, John Allen. Outside of the immediate family, of course. My high school football coach, John Allen, really taught me. I think the number one quote that comes to mind is, "It's not the size of the dog in a fight; it's the size of the fight in the dog." And he's the guy who always talked about, you can do anything in life that you want. Find out how someone else has done it and do the same thing, and you'll get the same result. I mean, he really exposed me to some great minds in the college football game. Vince Lombardi, just different quotes every day, different stories every day. That when you were there, I think sometimes you took for granted, but as I look back, it made a huge impact on my life at a very pivotal time when I was a high school adolescent. And then when I went to graduate school, Dr. Ken Revisa, my professor of sports psychology out at Cal State Fullerton, my mentor, and the guy who probably has had the biggest impact on my life just because he's trained me in the skill set and the system of sports psychology and mental conditioning that I use in my life today. Other guys would be Rob Gilbert, sports psychologist at Montclair State in New Jersey. He runs a hotline called the Success Hotline, which if you don't call every morning, you're missing the boat. It's a free hotline to call. All it is a 3-minute phone call, and he leaves you a mental game or motivational message every morning at 7:30 a.m. And that number for Success Hotline, Dr. Rob Gilbert, is 973-743-4690. And then just a tremendous amount of, coaches that have had an impact on my life, from George Horton at the University of Oregon, who was at Cal State Fullerton, that really gave me my start in the mental game of baseball, to Augie Garrido and his book, Life is Yours to Win, the former head baseball coach at Fullerton, who's now at Texas, the all-time winningest college coach, 5 national championships over 4 decades, to Skip Bertman, the former baseball coach and athletic director at LSU, who won 5 national championships there in the 90s. And a lot of coaches, that I work with currently, Mike Bianco at Ole Miss, Tim Corbin at Vanderbilt, Jim Schlossnagle at TCU, Patrick Murphy at Alabama, who won the national championship in 2012. And, I'd be remiss to not say everybody I work with, because I truly believe, Marcelo, that everyone who you come in contact with can teach you something about yourself and teach you something about life. And it might be something to do, and it might be something not to do, but every situation has value. And if you go into it with an open mind, you're going to get the most out of that situation.
Wow. First of all, it's an impressive list. Secondly, you bring up the being a life learner in your comment there. How can people make it more sustainable? Because I find that the challenges, and when I worked with athletes or when I worked with just the general population, sustainability of being at peak performance is always a challenge. And I imagine, you deal with higher level athletes. What are some things besides affirmation, reading, and writing that they can do to train that brain more effectively?
Really, I think the key to any success comes down to one of my favorite quotes of all time, which is, the secrets of success are hidden in the routines of your daily lives. I'll say that again. The secrets of success are hidden in the routines of your daily lives. Very similar to the quote that Jim Collins gave us in his great book, Good to Great, where he said, to be successful and consistent over time, you must be able to describe what you do as a process. Also, you must be able to describe what you do as a routine. So the best people that I've been around, from George St. Pierre, UFC world champion, to, David Price, Cy Young Award winner, to, Patrick Murphy, who won a national championship with Alabama, to Brett Hawk at Auburn Swimming, who won 18 straight SEC conference championships in men's swimming and diving. The thing that they all do is they all have very consistent routines for how they live their life on a daily basis, and all of those routines have some, educational component in it, whether it's calling somebody else in the field or in a different field and interviewing them just like you're doing right now, listening to a podcast in the car, listening to a book on tape, reading, spending time observing practices of other teams on campus, going to watch high school teams practice to see what they can learn. George St. Pierre has just been a treat to work with because he's a guy who I think is light years ahead of most other people in MMA, in that he's going to work, he's going to train now in gymnastics. He doesn't even really do a ton of strength and conditioning anymore. It's all gymnastics training, which how many other professional fighters are spending time training in gymnastics? And he realizes that the sport specificity and the crossover from the way that they train to what goes on inside the octagon is very similar. You have to be explosive, strong, flexible, etc. So just surrounding yourself and getting outside of your bubble to see what other people do is very, very valuable. And I think structuring key components into your routine, whether it be going online and watching a YouTube video every day. And I'm not a proponent of sitting in front of a computer and watching videos. I always encourage people to, get the computer, put it on the treadmill, or get on a stationary bike and ride and learn at the same time. So not only you're getting the physical workout, you're getting the mental workout as well. Maximize your time.
I so agree with that. It's being active. Studies show too. The more activity that you do, the more active your brain becomes. Hence, you're using your learning ability more effectively. So exercising and working out has shown to be very effective in physical education, and so I think that's a great GSP. That's really cool. George, out of all the MMA athletes, he's definitely the most unique individual. When you've worked with some of these athletes and you've seen what they do from a workout standpoint, what are some things that you do in your workout? Because it sounds, you obviously have to train people mentally and physically. What do you do in your workouts, and what type of technology do you use?
In terms of technology, you mean in terms of like heart rate monitors and stuff like that, or I'm not sure if not.
Yeah, stuff like that. Yeah, it's sports technology, or even if it's a training methodology. If you could share just a couple of modalities maybe that you think are quite effective.
When in my field, for me, it's a time consumer, and I don't know how about the practical application of what we do per se in a sports psychology lab to what goes on in the field. And from a time perspective, it's just not the most useful, use of my time. I know, like at certain programs that have full-time sports psychologists, like the University of Tennessee, they'll do a lot of, biofeedback work with their athletes in the lab about heart rate control through breathing and, being able to monitor their thoughts and keep a quiet mind. And for me, when I'm on the road working with, 40 different college athletic teams, and I'm in there for 3 days at a time, my routine, that doesn't allow for the time that it takes to use that equipment. I've got probably 15 to 20 minute individual meetings with every athlete on the team, as well as staff meetings, at practice observation, and then team seminar presentation as well. And that was going to take all of 3 days from about 6 a.m. to midnight. But when I meet with those individual athletes, what I will often use is I'll keep Evernote, which is a program on my computer that I use to keep track of every conversation I have with every athlete over the last 5 years. Just notes so that, let's say there's a kid from, an athlete from, Georgia who calls me tomorrow, I can immediately pull up Evernote, go back to the last conversation we had, and connect the dots from a conversation of 3 months ago to what's going on today. I also use, Sony Soundboard, which is an audio recording program. So when we get done with our conversation, I make a 2 or 3 minute reminders on audio, which I email to them directly so that they have that to listen to. I use Dropbox so that I can sync files with my computer to the iPhones of every athlete that I work with. So if I come across a new audio like this, I'll take this audio recording, I'll put it in the Dropbox. They get it instantly on their phone. I then use a mass text messaging program to send them all a text that says, hey, just put this interview in your Dropbox, take a listen. And then I'll, use their iPhone, really. I call it an MCD, a mental conditioning device. And we use different appointments in their calendar as a part of their routine. So I might have, let's say if they have 3 goals, and I have them set those goals, they'll set an appointment to go off on their iPhone at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. every day to remind them of their goals. I'll also have them set an appointment, for say 8 a.m. called the Attitude of Gratitude Journal. So every morning at 8 a.m., their phone's going to ring, and it's going to come up and say Attitude of Gratitude Journal. They open up that appointment, and there's a note section on the bottom, and they write down the things that they're thankful for, because research shows that when you start your morning with a mentality of gratitude and appreciating what you do have, you often are more positive as you go through your day. So that's some of the technology we use. It's not, it's not as specific as a heart rate monitor, a biofeedback machine, but I think it's what's practical with what I'm doing and with the athletes I'm working with.
It's the most effective, I feel. You're talking about keeping it simple, and I'm not trying to demean it at all. I'm trying to actually say that's very effective because it's very meaningful. You're establishing, like you've made your recommendations of establishing that routine, and the most important thing is connecting all the aspects, mind, body, and spirit. It's really cool to hear and see. One thing when you mentioned there that you have been around certain things as far as breathing techniques or even do you do any type of breathing or any type of meditation techniques for people to deal with moments of stress?
Yeah, I try to be proactive and train them in the breathing techniques and the ability to self-regulate and self-control, before they get in a stressful environment. So when they do get in a stressful environment, they've trained and conditioned that relaxation response already. And it might be as easy as, a couple exercises I'll do is called the 5-4-3-2-1 breathing exercise, where I have them go through and do a body scan as they focus on their breath. I'll have them inhale. This is about as easy as it gets right here. Inhale and count 6 to 8. Exhale and count 8 to 10, and try to do that for 5 to 10 breaths while keeping your mind in the moment. We'll do, we'll practice a physical release. I think when the red assassin shows up and you get tension in performance, or you disagree with an umpire's call or something that happens, you have to have a way to release that and get yourself back to the present moment. And that may be, stepping out and undoing your batting gloves or knocking dirt off your spikes. But all of those are training techniques to help you keep the mind in the moment. And if you get my podcast, the Brian Cain Peak Performance Podcast in iTunes, all of those breathing exercises we just talked about are available in there for you to download for free. There's videos where I was featured on a Fox Sports in a game between the University of Texas and Baylor baseball for about 20 minutes, where I actually talk you through everything that the players are doing on the field. So it's really, the podcast is a tremendous resource for people who want to go and learn more about the mental game. All my whole system and training techniques, everything we do, really revolves around what I call the 4-RIP-3 system. And that's predominantly the foundation for me of the mental game. The 4-RIP-3 system, the 4 R's, having routines, being able to recognize your self-talk and recognize where you're at. If it's red, you have to be able to release. If it's green, you refocus back to the next play or the next pitch. The I is mental imagery, and the 3 P's are to live in the present, to focus on the process, and to stay positive. I feel like if you can do those eight things, have routines, recognize, release, refocus, use imagery, stay in the present, focus on the process, and stay positive, you're going to become a peak performer.
Wow, that's awesome. I've listened to a couple of your podcasts. I hope everyone does take you up on that opportunity, because it's basically working with you one-on-one, but at any time when you want to, and you can repeat it as often as you want to. And if you're trying to improve yourself, And not only for sports, it could be for business, it could be for all these applications. It's a mindset, and that it's kind of what I'm trying to encourage people to understand. It's not life, business, they're all the same thing. It's competition. And it could be healthy competition, you can have a healthy approach to it. So I definitely encourage everyone, jump on those podcasts. It helps a lot. What do you do to, let's take a step back. What do you do to get away from everything? Because it sounds like you're constantly working with people and you're so structured. What do you do to relax?
Well, therein lies the biggest challenge that I face in my life, and that's where a lot of my goals have been structured. Last year, 2012-13 school year, I was on the road about 260 to 270 days, and it's nearly impossible to maintain a balance in life that way. As Tony Robbins would say, proximity is power, and when you're not near, your significant other or not near people who you care about, sometimes they forget about you and things don't work out. So I've really cut my schedule back this year to, I'm going to be on the road 120 days, no more, and definitely no less. And try to do a lot more in the world of Skype and online coaching and conferencing that way, because I feel like I've established a relationship and the credibility to be able to now do that and still be effective. So that will give me a little bit better balance. But, to recharge my batteries, Marcelo, it's a very unique situation. When you absolutely love what you do, and if I had 3 days left to live, I'd be doing this on one of those days. I would be training the mental game and athletes and coaches and other people on one of those days. I don't see it a job. It's not a job for me. It's not work for me. It is a mission, and it is a calling, and it is a passion, and I want to do it. I want to do it at the highest level. I want to do it all day, every day. So sometimes I just have to close the computer, turn the cell phone off, get on a bike and go for a ride, go play tennis, go to the beach, or just, go to a yoga session, or just kind of say, all right, today's a free day, and I'm going to do whatever my girlfriend wants to do, and I'm going to be okay with that, even if it's sitting on the couch, which I despise, and watching TV. But I try to break my routine and my schedule up into 3 types of days. I have what I call, focus days where I grind out work. I have flexibility days where I focus on doing work, but if something else comes in the mix, I may be able to be a little more adaptable. I have free days where, I kind of just go and do whatever I want to do for myself, and then I have family days where it's all about the family. So those 4 days, focused, where I'm locked into work and a bomb could go off outside of my office and I'm not going to break focus. I have flexibility where I start off with that same type of focus, but I'm a little bit more flexible in terms of I may actually answer the phone that day. And then I have free days where it's totally up to me and I take care of myself first. And then I have family days. And in the past, I've probably had, 5 focus days and maybe 2 flexible days. And I really am working to get better at that. So it might be, 3 focus days, 1 flexibility day, 1 free day, and 2 family days over the course of a week.
Wow. Yeah, it definitely the passion on this conversation has shown, and I'm more motivated now, just really doing these meetings and meeting you, amazing individual. You have this drive. You mentioned an author before, Tony Robbins. The methodology that he uses, NLP, or kind of a training methodology for the people out there, for the mind. What's your comments on that type of modality of treatment, NLP?
My understanding of what Tony does is it's actually not NLP, but it's what he calls NAC, neuro-associative conditioning. NLP is neuro-linguistic programming. NAC is neuro-associative conditioning. And, I think there's a lot of validity to what he does. I think, I think a lot of times if you're especially a coach or an athlete and you went to a Tony Robbins seminar and he's got you pumping the fist, screaming yes, and dancing up and down and getting into state, I think a lot of people are probably not open-minded enough to play full out, as he always asks you to do, and get into it. But I think if you do, I think there's definite benefit to that neuroassociative conditioning. And, I think that, Tony's model of the 3 S's of you got to get in state, you got to tell yourself the right story, and you got to have the right strategies, with everything that revolving around being in the right state of mind to walk across fire or be in the right state of mind before you do anything. And state being a product of your physiology, your focus, and the language that you use. I think he's onto a lot of things there. I don't completely understand the neuro-linguistic programming or neuroassociative conditioning, and anchoring and all that. I believe there's validity to your state for sure. I use the term get big. But I think, you cannot argue with the results that Tony Robbins has had, and you can't argue with the success that he's had. So he's on to something, and actually his 2 books are on my list of things to read, again, for the first 2 weeks in September. I map out what books I'm going to read when. And I'm pretty fired up to get back into it and get some time to actually talk with Tony here and to learn a little bit more about what he does.
I've read his books. I've enjoyed it. I've often gone back to it too. It's really interesting, to hear your story and to have this conversation with you. I have really just one thing that should tie this all together. Hopefully, if someone is a student or a person that's aspiring to get into sports psychology, what would you recommend for them to do so they can get a head start on their career path?
First thing I probably would encourage them to do is go get a business degree. Because, if you're going to get into sports psychology, I am kind of an anomaly, I think, in that I've been able to achieve a level of success due to my relationship with Ken Ravizza. If it was not for Ken Ravizza, I would have a sports psychology degree. I would not be working in the field of sports psychology and mental conditioning. So the number one important factor of being credible in this field, I believe, is who you associate yourself with. As Tony says, right? Tony Robbins says you become the average of the 5 people who you hang out with most. So there's a lot of sports psychology programs out there that are in the realm of research or in the realm of clinical sports psychology. And if that's what people want to do, then great. Be a sports psychology professor at a university. Work in a clinical setting. Those are awesome. Those are very needed and valuable, positions. The role of applied sports psychology consultant, which is what I do, where you're, in the trenches, working with coaches, grinding out days from 6 a.m. to midnight, available to work with athletes. Those, I don't know if there's a path that you can go on from an educational standpoint. I think it's more about associating yourself with people who are doing the work and almost being more like a apprentice. It's almost more art than it is science. And I was able to be around Ravizza for those 2 years at Cal State Fullerton, observe him working with many teams, and then able to take that system and over the last 10 years, craft it to become my own. So that would be my number one piece of advice, would be to get to a business degree or take business classes, because if you're ever going to get paid doing sports psychology, you have to know how to market yourself. So maybe it would be marketing classes, not business classes. But then once you're able to get in front of an audience, then you've got to deliver on what you know. So you must also have a good pedigree and background in the field of sports psychology. But understand that when you speak to athletes and coaches, they could give a damn about the research in sports psychology. They want to know what to do and when to give them a better chance to win. Now, you need to know the research, because you need to be able to talk about what is best practice and what works, but you've got to do it in a way that makes it super simple that they can apply it. And I see that as the gap in the field, is that there's people who have PhDs in sports psychology that know all the theory, and then the gap is between the theory and the practitioner or the coach who's out there who needs to know what to do. And then you've got people who call themselves maybe life coaches or peak performance coaches who don't have the sports psychology background, and they're out there trying to tell coaches what to do, and sometimes it's not accurate. And I think there's a gap and a divide between the two. So get marketing classes, get a degree in sports psychology. Most importantly, find a mentor in that field, in that area. Read as much as you possibly can. Be willing to work for free for a long time and get into the trenches to get recommendations from coaches, because I've never once in my life gotten a job because I called someone and said, hey, I got a degree in sports psychology, hire me, I want to make your athletes mentally tough. It doesn't work that way. It's because you get raving fans, you get results, and you get people who put their coaches in the field who put their name with you and then promote you to their friends in the field. That's the way it works.
You've shared so much important knowledge on this call. I want to thank you for taking the time to share that with us. We're just up and coming. I really appreciate having an opportunity of speaking with a professional like you, and I look forward to maybe doing this again. I'd love to support your podcast as well and support your books. I'm looking for I'm going to go and pursue, probably get a couple of your books, start reading them, because I've listened to your podcast and I think the value in the structure. I thought I'm always trying to overcome my things, my obstacles, and I like your game plan, your solution for it. It's logical, it's sustainable. I think it's a great wealth of information, and you share it, and I really want to thank you for that.
Well, Marcelo, I appreciate the opportunity to be on the call, and I ask you, as you're kind of in the growing stages of your career here, is just to do something that Ken Ravizza always encouraged me to do as you grow and you get more experience, and your platform of influence increases, is to always pay it forward. And always be willing to, take the time to help and mentor other people and help them get started, because somebody did that for you many years ago. And if there's ever anything I can do for you, or ever anything I can do for your listeners, I will do everything that I can to help anyone who I can. I get as much enjoyment out of working with a 13-year-old softball player down the street as I do with George St. Pierre. I just think a lot of people are more interested in hearing about George St. Pierre than they are about the 13-year-old softball player down the street. But from my perspective, performance is performance. I enjoy working with, whether it's Major League Baseball, Little League Baseball, or anything in between. For me, it's all about the relationship with the individual. And, if there's anything I can offer your listeners via my website, briancain.com, BrianCain.com, or via Twitter, my handle is @BrianCainPeak, Peak. I'm more than happy to do so.
I encourage people to take you up on it. I think you'd be really losing out if you don't even try, because to be honest, that's where it starts. I wish people try because it's okay to not exactly get it perfect the first time around, but the whole idea is to try and to strive. So, again, this is awesome. I'm supercharged for my day. Thanks a lot, and I look forward to following up with you in the future.
You got it, Marcelo. My pleasure, man. Make sure that you absolutely dominate the day, and a great tool that I've got coming out next month to help you dominate the day, which I want to make sure that people are aware of, because I'm super jacked up about it, is the Daily Dominator. I wrote a 366, because every once in a while there's a leap year, and there's more than 365 days. It's a 366 daily reader, and every day you get to start your day with a little breakfast for your mind and a little mental conditioning. In the morning, to be able to continue to build off of some of the momentum that we've created here today. So if people are fired up and inspired by this phone call, I encourage you in this podcast, I encourage them to pick up the Daily Dominator. If not, best to them anyway.
Where can they get it?
It's not out yet. It's going to be out probably maybe by August 5th, 2013, and they'll be able to get that at briancain.com. And if they go to my website and sign up for my newsletter, obviously anytime I have a new product or something coming out, I do a marketing launch, and I will make sure that other people who are on my newsletter get first access to those books and those products. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and best of luck to you.
Thank you. You as well.